The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
While some people were speaking about how the temple was adorned with costly stones and votive offerings, Jesus said, "All that you see here, the days will come when there will not be left a stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down." Then they asked him, "Teacher, when will this happen? And what sign will there be when all these things are about to happen?" He answered, "See that you not be deceived. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and the time has come. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for such things must happen first, but it will not immediately be the end." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be powerful earthquakes, famines, and plagues from place to place, and awesome sights and many signs will come from the sky. Before all this happens, however, they will seize and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogues and to prisons, and they will have you led before kings and governors because of my name. It will lead to your giving testimony. Remember, you are not to prepare your defense beforehand, for I myself shall give you a wisdom in speaking, that all your adversaries will be powerless to resist or refute. You will even be handed over by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a hair on your head will be destroyed. By your perseverance, you will secure your lives." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There's a scene from a Three Stooges movie that resonates with me for some reason. It teaches us a valuable opposite about the gospel. It takes place in medieval times, and the Three Stooges are there, and a member of the king's royal court shows up and tells the Three Stooges, "The king demands your presence." And Mo gets really nervous. And Larry says, "Mo, what's wrong?" And Mo says, "We don't have any presents." And Curly says, "Yeah, the stores were all closed." Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk. Right? We don't have any presents. The king is demanding a thing from us, right? It always struck me. I probably saw that when I was 10, and it hit me in prayer this week as I was listening to this loving message from our God who is not demanding but desiring, a God who doesn't demand our things that have earthly value. He thirsts and desires relationship with us. He desires us. And it's in that spirit that we hear Jesus speaking to us about how to abide in him, how to allow him to abide in us. As he's prophesying to his followers then, he prophesies to us now. And he's predicting the fall of the temple. He's predicting the persecution of the early church. Similarly, today, he cautions us not to get attached to passing things and to always be prepared to die, because we do also suffer persecution. We can boil it down to how he loves us enough to warn us not to be distracted, not to be deceived, not to be afraid, but always be prepared to die. Always. Not to be distracted. We heard Jesus speaking to those who were distracted by the beautiful adornments of the temple, and Jesus says it's all passing. It's all passing. Right? How easily it is for us to maybe get focused on things of this passing world that are intended to point to God. Right? And we get stuck on the earthly value of that thing itself. The word distract literally means to lose traction. And that's a good way to look at this. Jesus is saying, don't allow yourself to lose traction in my relationship with you. Don't lose traction. I met a young man the other night who noticed my crucifix and wanted to talk about it. I'm thinking, this is great. Unfortunately, for a couple minutes, all he could do was wonder aloud, oh, that's silver. That must be some sort of precious metal. Oh, there's something black and shiny. That must be this type of material, that type of material. And at the end of it, I said, this has no value except to remind us that our benevolent King loves us, to die for us, to offer us. He thirsts for us. That's the only value this crucifix has. It's made of things of this world that are passing, but let it speak to you as a sign that you are loved. It kind of woke him up out of a distraction that was happening for him. We know all too well the robbing of relationship that happens when we are distracted, whether it's driving, whether it's sitting across a table, when we hunger and yearn for intimacy and something causes a loss of traction between us. Jesus says, don't be distracted. Don't lose traction by the things that are passing. One of the biggest concerns I have is the reality that sometimes a church building closes for pastoral reasons. Something for us to pray about. I see too often that we are grieving and mourning the loss of bricks and mortar and paint more than we ever have mourned and grieved the loss of a child of God who has fallen away from relationship. More rejoicing in heaven over one repentant sinner. The buildings are passing. Don't be distracted, Jesus says to us in love. Don't be deceived, he goes on to say. And he's speaking of the Antichrist, the false prophets who will show up in his name, claiming to say, I am he, the time is now. Do not be deceived. And the word deceive means to take something from. To take something from. Don't allow anybody or any organization to take from you the role of God. Don't allow anyone to take from you the direction and destination of your worship that is due only to God alone, Jesus is telling us. This is how we abide in him and he abides in us when we align our worship to him and him alone, the one true Messiah who has come in the flesh. In the first pillar of the Catechism, the church has a beautiful treatment on this, and I encourage you to go there. Holy Mother Church talks about how as we await Jesus' coming, second coming, the biggest trial we have is to resist the temptation of adoring ourselves. Mankind putting all of his faith in himself, the worship due to God alone. It's called secular messianism. It's very obvious in politics, maybe a little less obvious in areas like exercise and entertainment and the workplace, right? It's good to exercise. It's relaxing to have a little bit of entertainment. Work has inherent dignity. Those are not the end goals. Don't allow those things to take from us, Jesus says, the worship due only to God alone. I know people who literally say that the gym is my church. And I say, you're finding something of value there, which is a good, but in all love, who are you worshiping? Caution. Don't allow the gym to become your God. You'll be sadly disappointed. I know people who follow celebrities more than they follow Jesus, although desiring to be a Christian. Caution. Do you know more about that celebrity who appeared on a reality TV show than you know about the life of Jesus Christ? Caution. Work is a good thing. I know too many people who give themselves totally to work and wake up one day to find that it's been at the expense of family, relationship, worship, health. They've allowed work to take the place that only God should take. And they wake up someday not being employed and realizing their identity is gone, and they're sadly disappointed. These are the loving cautions and warnings that our Lord gives us today. Don't be deceived. And regarding politics, it's important to be involved in the political sphere, to advocate for justice. It's also important to know that God's laws transcend man's laws. And despite what the law of the land is, we can always follow God's laws. And remember, my friends, my brothers and sisters, that God does not fit neatly into any one political party. We'll be sadly disappointed on Judgment Day if we've allowed a political party to become our God. Don't be distracted. Don't lose traction. Don't be deceived. Don't let something else take the place of God in your lives. Don't be afraid. Jesus was warning his disciples then of real, gruesome, vicious persecution, torture, suffering, and death. That still exists in the world today for followers of Christ. We may forget that. It might, some ways, be easier to entertain the violent type of death that we might experience, but let us open our eyes to any way that we might be subtly living in the fear that comes with the type of persecution that we face, the loss of reputation, the discounting of our intelligence. You must be a fool to believe what you believe. The detraction, the speaking falsely and calumny that we endure along the way. Christ is with us during that. In fact, indeed, we are encouraged and reminded by our Lord and Holy Mother Church that in times of persecution and suffering and that type of violence, it's exactly when we are to be prepared to witness to compassion and forgiveness. Do not be afraid. Let the perfect love of God cast out our fear as we go forth. Because we do go forth into a world that is distracted and is being deceived and is living in fear. My friends, today, our benevolent King offers us his presence that we might become who we receive, that we might be sustained in our daily lives, but especially sustained to go forth and announce, just like that member of the royal court in the Three Stooges movie, but not to say something of a harsh king demanding things from people, but let us ask for the grace to continue to go forth into a hurting world, to announce that our loving, benevolent King, the one who washes our feet, desires you, invites you to live in him, to allow him to live in you now and forever.